The sources to study ancient Indian history can be divided into three broad categories: archaeological sources, foreign travelers' account, and literary sources. Archaeological sources can be further divided into inscriptions, coins, and monuments. Foreign travelers' accounts are available from historical time period, and these are fewer in numbers for ancient time. Literary sources can be divided into religious literature and secular literature. Religious literature can further be divided into Brahmanical literature, Buddhist literature, and Jain literature. Secular literature can be divided into Sanskrit kavyas, texts, mostly texts which are composed in Sanskrit language, and also literature that are available in Tamil language, mostly Sangam literature. So these are the three broad categories of primary sources that are available to study ancient Indian history. Now, going deeper into these sources, the archaeological sources, which is the first category, there are basically three broad categories: inscriptions, coins, and monuments. So in case of inscriptions, the study of inscriptions is known as numismatics, and these inscriptions are available from Mauryan time onwards. So for pre-Mauryan age, we do not have any such inscriptions from Indian subcontinent. The inscriptions are usually inscribed on walls, sometimes on temple walls, sometimes on pillars, and in some instances also on coins, and also in some cases on monuments. So the inscriptions are basically written material available on some hard surface. The most well-known inscriptions are available from Ashoka's time. Ashoka inscribed his messages to his subject and to his ministers through these inscriptions. These inscriptions were inscribed on the pillars, and these are available from Indian subcontinent, from different parts of Indian subcontinent. These inscriptions gives us information about Ashoka's administration, his empire's territorial extent, his dhamma, and his victories over some certain ruling classes. Another important example of the importance of inscriptions is Samudragupta's Allahabad pillar inscription. In this inscription, we find reference of several contemporary rulers who were ruling during Samudragupta's reign. They were either enemies or friends of Samudragupta. Samudragupta was valorized in this inscription, as this particular inscription was of eulogical nature. It was composed by Harisena, Samudragupta's court poet, and Harisena depicted Samudragupta as a heroic ruler. So Samudragupta's Allahabad Pillar Prashasti is a very important inscription that helps us to reconstruct the Gupta age. So these are two examples of how inscriptions can help us in finding out the name of rulers, their chronology, the region in which they ruled, and their administrative structure. However, we always have to rely on other archaeological sources as well as literary sources. So the second category of archaeological sources is coins. Study of coins is known as numismatics, and coins also helps us in reconstructing ancient history. From coins, we get to know about the name of certain rulers, their titles, the period in which they ruled, and also from coins we learn a little about the art of that particular time period. For example, from Gupta Empire, we have a large volume of coins available. Study of these available coins have shown that the Gupta Empire was a vast empire. The rulers mostly followed Hindu religion, and the rulers were often shown as a heroic character. There were coins such as Tiger Slayer type coin, in which the ruler was shown as slaying a tiger. This shows that the ruler was conscious about his prestige and his status. At the same time, there were also images of the ruler, images of the deity that he used to worship, and also in some instances images of his wife. So all these informations help us to understand the nature of a particular time period, like what was the kind of kingdom that was in existence. So we know that these were basically dynasties, monarchical dynasties. And also on the basis of the images on these coins, we learn about the artistic achievements of this particular time. Also, the coins that are available from Gupta time onwards, these were made of gold, even though coins made of other metals are also available. But because of the good quality of gold metal that was used in these coins, shows that perhaps the economy was doing well. And as a result, coins were issued in pure gold. So coins, like on their own, coins are not very helpful. However, with inscriptions and monuments, these can help us to reconstruct the history of ancient India. The third category of archaeological sources is monuments. Monuments also helps in understanding the material past of a particular time period. We have monuments available from Harappan time onwards. These are basically proto-historical monuments, and besides we have monuments from Mauryan time, from Gupta time. So the volume of evidence in the form of monuments is quite large, and it helps us to understand the history of ancient past. The monuments can help us to understand the architectural designs or the architectural achievements of a particular time. It also helps us to read or study the religion of a particular time, because in certain cases we see that these monuments were dedicated to religious establishments. For example, the study of ancient temples helps us to understand how really Hindu religion was perceived in this particular time. Monuments in the absence of literary sources can also helps us to understand the material life of a particular time. For example, because the Harappan script is not deciphered yet, with the help of monuments we can understand or we can study the history of Harappan civilization. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-daro and the town planning in the Harappan cities, all this helps us to understand that Harappan civilization was an urban civilization. So without the use of monuments and other archaeological sources, we couldn't have studied Harappan civilization. So monuments on their own can be very helpful, and if literary sources are also available, it can even help us more. So besides these archaeological sources, there is another category of sources that can help us to study ancient history, and these are literary sources. In literary sources, we have religious literature. Religious literature, as we know, can be further divided into Brahmanical literature, Buddhist literature, and Jain literature. The earliest written material that are available from Indian subcontinent are Brahmanical literature. These includes the Puranas, the Vedas, the epics, the Upanishads. So all these different kind of Brahmanical literature and normative text helps us to understand India's past. Especially for Vedic age, for which we do not have a large volume of archaeological sources, we have to be dependent on the Vedas and the Puranas and the later Brahmanical text to study this particular time. So from the Vedas, we reconstruct the Vedic age, and also from the Puranas and from the epics, we reconstruct the history of later kingdoms such as Satavahanas, Guptas, and the genealogy of different dynasties can be ascertained by using the Puranas. So the Brahmanical texts are very helpful in studying political economic history of ancient dynasties. Besides Brahmanical literature, the Buddhist and Jain literature also helps in understanding India's past. Buddhist literature can be divided into three categories. They are actually known as Jatakas, Pitakas and Nikayas. These texts contains teachings of the Buddha and also the rules and regulations that are to be followed in the monasteries by the monks and the nuns. So these literatures were composed long after the Buddha expired. So these literatures helps us to understand not only the history of Buddhism but also contemporary life in the last years of before Common Era. The third category of religious literature is Jain literature, and Jain literatures also helps us to understand the history of Jain religion and also of the contemporary society. From Jain literature we learn that several new languages were used to write text. So Prakrit was one language which was used to compose this literature. So this helps us to understand the evolution of languages and also about the history of different Mahavirs like Jain Mahavirs and how they helped in the formation of Jain religion. So besides religious literature, there is another category which is known as secular literature. And secular literature, the corpus of secular literature is quite large and it includes different literary texts that were composed in Sanskrit and also in regional languages. Like in this particular time, especially till the late ancient time, several new languages came into existence. So there were literary works that are available in Sanskrit. There are also literary works available in Tamil and Pali, Prakrit. So we have a Brahmi, so we have a large corpus of literary works that are available, and these can be categorized into secular literature. For Sanskrit literature, actually, the volume is quite large, and we have the first instance of an important literary work, that is the Arthashastra. The Arthashastra belonged to the Mauryan age, and this particular text gives us information about Mauryan administration, the polity of this particular time, and also about the history of Mauryan Empire. So besides Arthashastra, in the subsequent times, many other literary works were composed in Sanskrit. And these includes, there is one literary work which is very important, which is known as Abhigyana Shakuntalam, composed by Kalidasa. And Kalidasa was somebody who lived during Gupta Empire's reign. So besides Abhigyana Shakuntalam, there were other literary works that were composed in Sanskrit, and many of these were composed by Kalidasa. So all these literary works first shows us that how Sanskrit language was evolving and becoming a very important language in the history of languages. And at the same time, we also know about the contemporary society from these literary texts. So these literatures that were composed in Sanskrit are very helpful. And besides many other scientific works, such as works related to astronomy, mathematics, grammar, these were composed in Sanskrit language. There were literature associated with medicine, such as Sushruta Samhita, Charak Samhita. These were composed in Sanskrit. And there were texts like Brihaspati Siddhant, which were composed in Sanskrit language. So all these different corpus of text were written in Sanskrit, and it clearly shows the achievement of people who lived in ancient India. Besides, we have another category of secular literary sources, which is Tamil literature. And for Tamil literature, most of the texts that were composed in Tamil are known as Sangam literature, and that is mainly because these literary texts were compiled in certain assemblies, and these assemblies were known as Sangam. And because these texts were compiled in this Sangam, so these are known as Sangam literature. So besides Sangam literature, there are other Tamil literature which includes two Tamil epics, Silapadikaram and Manimegalai. So together, all these literary text helps us to understand the history of Deccan region as well as Tamilakam area. So all these literary works are helpful in studying ancient Indian history. So these are the main primary sources to study India's past. Besides, there is another category which is known as foreign travelers' account. Now, foreign travelers' accounts are also useful, even though we cannot rely on them entirely. For example, we have foreign travelers' accounts in the form of Megasthenes Indica, and we have also writings of Chinese travelers such as Huan-Tsang. Now, Megasthenes, he came to India, and his text Indica, it is lost. But from references of later scholars, we come to know about this particular text. It says about India's society, like how the society was divided on the basis of caste. It also talks about the economy, like Indian traders had trading connections with the Roman world. So in that way, Megasthenes Indica provides us some information about India's history. At the same time, Huan-Tsang, who came to India during Harshvardhan's reign, and he stayed in India for a very long time, and he wrote about India's culture, about the political history, and he also wrote about the education system. So from Huan-Tsang's writing also we learn a lot about India's ancient past. So these are just two examples, but the list of scholars who traveled to India in ancient time is quite long, and these include scholars like Phayyan, Itsing. And in early medieval time, there were many more scholars who traveled to Indian subcontinent, and from their writings, we learn about India's history. So in another video, I would like to cover the sources that are available to study medieval time as well as the modern history of India.